Why is this so vital to Jesus? Here's one of the unfortunate things about, and I must say, I say this very tongue-in-cheek. Here's one of the unfortunate things about the Gospels. They don't give you a lot of inside baseball, like bio stuff. Okay, we don't get to see 6-year-old Jesus hanging out with Joseph, his earthly father. We don't get little the closest we get, you guys know the story, 12-year-old Jesus, and poor 12-year-old Jesus gets left in Jerusalem by his family. They don't even know he's gone for 48 hours. They have to go back and get him. So I don't know, maybe things weren't so, they weren't quite the same there as they are here in the way children were raised. That's obviously for sure. But we don't get that, we don't get Jesus from like age 2 to age 12. There's a decade gap. We actually do get age 2 Jesus because that's probably the reason why Herod kills baby boys 2 and under, because based on where the star was, Jesus has probably been on the earth 2 years. So Herod's like, kill off those boys. And so we don't get it. But, okay, so let's get creative, shall we? And when you get creative, I'm not trying to create like new gospels, new versions of the story. We just use life experience to try to tell you how something might have went down. And we'll use something we know went down in Jesus' life. Okay, so for instance, we know Jesus, there's no mention of Joseph by the time Jesus is in ministry. So somewhere between the age of 12 and the age of 30, Joseph dies, because all we have is his mother and his brethren by the time he goes into public ministry. So in that 18-year gap, he loses his earthly father. But his earthly father is the first natural man mentioned in the New Testament, Joseph. And his story encompasses almost nearly a chapter of the very first gospel. So I can't believe that Joseph didn't play a vital role in raising the Jesus we know at age 30. Because if the Gospels take so much pain to include Joseph's grace into the story, then Joseph's grace had to be a part of Jesus' life. And let me give you an example of where it would have been necessary for the dreamer Joseph to be real in Jesus' life. Because we all tend to think Jesus thought of God as his father, and so he goes, me and my father are one, and that he probably didn't look at Joseph as his father. I think we're wrong. Because Jesus comes into an awareness of his call by age 12. I was about my father's business, okay? Which means that, and that was the age of bar mitzvah. That's the age where a Jewish boy becomes a Jewish man. So that age 12 business is Jesus shedding off the childhood Jesus and starting to pick up the ministry Jesus at 12. And so he knows his father's will. Me and my father are one. But in that preceding dozen years, that decade between age 2 and age 12, Jesus is raised as any other Jewish boy would be in the backwaters of the Roman Empire in Palestine. And he's raised going to synagogue, and he's raised hearing Torah, and he's raised hearing the stories of his father. And let me just tell you one that I think had to be one of the most poignant, one of the most powerful that Jesus had to endure. Have you ever thought about the fact that Jesus did not have a peer of his gender from his hometown? Because every baby born 2 and under in Bethlehem was slaughtered at the hands of Herod. And Jesus was raised knowing that his existence cost a whole village full of boys their life. Think about that. He carried that with him every day. I don't know, as that became an awareness, if you could carry that weight. That's impossible. I'm the reason why your little baby was taken out of his crib and slaughtered right in front of you. Because you had the unlucky misfortune of living in the same town that I did. And I'm coming to an awareness that I'm here to save the world, but it seems like I got off to a really bad start. Like rather than saving the world, I shattered a few people's world. And I've heard it more than once from more than one unhappy family. And I just got to think that Joseph had to take him off to the side and tell him the story of how he heard from God and what the dream sequence meant that convinced him that Jesus was who he thinks he is. You have no idea when God is speaking into your life what that word will mean for the next generation. You have no idea what it will mean for the people important to you, the people around you. Because as you hear from God and you walk this out, you don't hear from God in a vacuum to where whatever God says to you is non-applicable to anyone around you. In fact, it becomes a reality to everyone who encounters you. What you've heard from God shapes you to go face the world. It shapes you to go to your job. It shapes you to raise your children. It shapes you to be a spouse. It shapes you because it shifts not just from a place of mercy, but to a place of grace. You go from not just not judging your neighbor, but to being valuable in the life of your neighbor because you've had a revelation of God. I think it's quite possible that Jesus needed taken aside a few times as a kid and reminded of the dreams that Joseph had, because it was in those dreams that Joseph learned of Jesus' importance. And Jesus' importance is the very reason why those kids died in Bethlehem. No, Jesus, it wasn't your fault that it happened. The world is an evil place, full of evil people, and death and chaos often come in on the back of beauty. And yet, it's something that we're going to have to deal with, Jesus. It's something you're going to have to think about. It's something you're going to have to live with. And maybe it'll cause you, as you walk into your ministry and you go do what you do, it will cause your heart to break for those who have lost their kids. And it will cause you to know the pain of separation and of failure and of the boot of an empire pressing down upon your neck. Because you lived with this over your head, you can go help take that burden off of other people who are living with that. We overlook the story of Joseph because we overlook people dreaming. We overlook the story of Joseph because we overlook people hearing from God. And yet, every day of our lives, every time we hear from God, it influences another generation because it causes us to take the steps that influence our future, that cause us to go left or to go right, that cause us to move forward when we just want to lay down, that cause us to get up when we just want to quit, because we've heard from God, because we spend time with Him. It's why you can't spend too much time listening to His voice, seeking His face, because the words that come out of that are words that change destinies, that change futures, that influence the world forever.